Linux Action Show is created by Jupiter Broadcasting. It's sponsored by Ting. Go to last.ting.com to save off your first device or plan. And DigitalOcean. Go to digitalocean.com and use the promo code Here's the Thing, all one word like you're slurring it, and spin up your own Linux rig for free. And Linux Academy. Go to linuxacademy.com/unplugged and invest in your mind while saving some money. Welcome to Linux Action Show, episode 432. My name is Chris.
My name is Noah.
Hello there, Noah. Guess what? We have
It's a good week this week. That's what I'm guessing.
It's big. It's large in size, Noah. It's an episode that might be considered large. And coming up in a little bit, Ryan Cypes will be joining us. He's got a big news announcement about the company he's joining, and we're going to discuss the Internet of Things like you've never heard it before. You heard our rant, well, somebody's rant last week, and we're going to respond to some of that, take in some of your criticism and feedback, and talk about open source solutions to make all of this crazy stuff a little more manageable. But before all of that, in the news segment, we're going to break down some of the week's best news, biggest news, important news. We also have some feedback, and of course, Noah, you know what we got?
Before all of that, Chris, we're getting to the picks.
And apparently announcer guy voice, too. See what you've done, chat room? Do you see what you've done? Also, a big shout out to the JBLive.tv chat room, who is here rocking out with us on this Sunday morning and encouraging Noah to use announcer guy voice. I have been looking forward. So I think it was on Thursday or maybe even Wednesday, you sent me a telegram saying, I've totally got our Runs Linux picked out. So I got that covered. And I was like, okay, that's a tease because you didn't tell me anything more. And now here we are. So Noah, introduce me and the audience. What is it this week that runs Linux?
So this week, my son is starting kindergarten, and so my wife invited me to come survey the school's technology. She called it something. She called it, the Meet the Teachers or something. But really, what she wanted me to do was go survey the school's technology.
Right.
So I went to my son's elementary school, and I'm walking in, and I'm wholly unimpressed. Right. First thing I do is I open my Wi-Fi app, and I get a sense of what they're using for access points, and I jot the model number down. That's a Cisco controlled system. Okay, that's not so bad. But then I start going into the classrooms, right? And the first thing I notice is they all got Macs. That's strike one. That's no good for Noah. And then the second thing I notice is we go into their little library computer lab area thing, and it's like 4 Windows XP boxes and a couple of really old iMacs.
And obviously, this is not a comfortable situation for Noah.
No, this is not going well at all. And so then I go. So I'm sitting down and I'm chatting with one of the staff members about how they're using the classroom and why they have these godforsaken old computers in here and whatnot. And they're telling me that they use this very elaborate smartboard system, and so it's a board that goes up, whiteboard that goes up, has a projector mounted on top of it that projects onto the board, and it's interactive.
I'm
so you can write on all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
So I of course I walk up, take the model number down, do all that, and I'm like, all right, I got to switch this to Linux. How would I get this to run on Linux? Maybe there's an open source standard for it or something. So I contact the company, and I'm like, here's the thing, my son, he's going to the school. They've got all this super old hardware, and I'd like to know at least how I could get this running on Linux. And the guy goes, "It runs on Linux," and I'm like, "Say what now?"
What? You mean I don't have to do anything? There's already a Linux version.
Yeah, and he's like, "Yeah," and so he sends me a link to their download section. He's like, "You can go download the software for free. It's useless to you without the $1,500 board that goes with it, but you can go download it, but it runs on Linux." And sure enough, they have not only a link to this to the software, but it actually runs on the latest version of Ubuntu. So this isn't like Ubuntu 10.04 type of things. But so the company is called Promethean, and they make the ActiveBoard 500. The ActiveBoard 500 is what has the projector and stuff, all of that interactive whiteboard, and the software is called Active Inspire. And basically what the software allows you to do is project an image onto the board, and whatever you draw with the special pen on the board, the computer can somehow capture where the pen is in relationship to the board and actually then make the drawn circle. And then you can take your fingers and I can stretch the object out, or I can move it aside, or I can bring pictures in, and I can do all of that with my hands, and somehow the computer can figure all that out. But it runs on Linux, and I'm like, that's super cool. So Promethean Active Inspire, or the Promethean software working with the Promethean Active Board, runs Linux.
That is slick. It looks like Renegade Dave, who's in our IRC chat room right now, says his school uses that same setup. So Promethean, I don't remember the brand, but same kind of thing. And they were also using old Macs and Windows XP to drive the thing. It's great to see them supporting a Linux version, and it makes you wonder if that's got to be in response to demand, Noah. right?
Well, I think what it is, I think a lot of schools are looking to move towards less expensive computers that they can give to the students. So in our school district, for example, they're giving a lot of the kids Chromebooks. And so my thought is, can I, and actually Chromebooks and Dell Inspiron 9s with Ubuntu on them.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so my thought is, can I come up with, I might be able to see if I can work something out in where Altispeed can donate a certain amount of machines that are pre-installed, with Linux.
Oh boy, you were about to go down a path. You were about to go down a path, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But yeah, actually, in my experience, school districts, if they find a parent who's actually very savvy and very resourceful, and not just, I think it should be done this way, because that's the majority of what comes into school districts are parents that think they know how it should be done. Very few of them will actually come in and spend some hours during the summer or spring break or winter break, and that's when the districts are doing their biggest network overhauls. That's when they need an expert in there, and that's your opportunity to go in there and say, well, we could do this with XYZ and it's free, and it's a perfect opportunity to sort of be at the ground level there. That's super cool. So maybe a direction they could take. So now, have you informed the school that they have this option? What's next?
The guy that is in charge of the entire school district was actually my teacher when I was back in high school.
He's like, I remember this guy.
Well, he was teaching networking 1, 2, and the thing is, there was 4 classes. It was networking 1, 2, 3, and 4. Networking 1 and 2, you actually learned things, and then years 3 and 4, you worked on doing things for the school, whatever they wanted you to do. And so the last 2 years that I spent with him, he gave me things to do, and then I accomplished them. Yeah. And so that's how we ended our relationship, 15 years ago, whatever.
So on good terms. Really?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I ran into him, and I started the conversation. I said, I'm here, and I'm doing independent network contracting in Grand Forks. And so, okay. And I said, yeah, we should get together and chat. And
I remember you.
Yeah. Well.
Did he?
Here's the thing. It wasn't a spotless record. I did. I wound up
what? No.
So the 2 things that got me in a lot of trouble. The first was I had these small little access points that I had taken from work. They were old ones that they had given me, and I had put them in our science lab so that I could get Wi-Fi on my laptop. And they had found them duct taped to the underside of the science things. And I got called down to the principal's office. He handed them back to me, and he's like, "When we're ready to put wireless in the school, we will put wireless in the school. Don't do this again." I'm like, I don't have Wi-Fi. And the second thing that got me in a lot of trouble was a buddy of mine and I figured out the password to their web server, and we made some improvements to the school's website.
Sure.
They didn't appreciate that.
Those are all just hallmarks of an overachiever, Noah. That's what it is, an overachiever.
They didn't see it that way.
Yeah, I got in some trouble when I was in school too. But yeah, you know what? Now you have an opportunity to make it right, Noah.
Yeah.
By convincing them to install Linux, which I'm sure they'll just love. Well, that's pretty cool. So Prometheum, we have a link in the show notes if you guys want to know more about it. And I'm glad to hear the technology survey overall went well for you. I have done the same survey myself, and the results were also just as disappointing. All right, well, I'll tell you what's not disappointing. If you want to spin up infrastructure on demand, you go to DigitalOcean. Damn, son. DigitalOcean.com. Just use our promo code, Here's the Thing, all one word, lowercase, like you're slurs in it, and you'll get a $10 credit over at DigitalOcean.com. It's infrastructure on demand, powered by Linux, KVM, all SSDs with the best internet connections you could possibly hope for. And then they wrap it all up with a gorgeous interface, a straightforward API that has tons of open source code already written, and data centers all over the world. They have an interface that's so simple and intuitive that if you're a beginner or a longtime pro, you're going to love it. Beginners, because it's intuitive and easy. Longtime pros, because you're sick of messing with this stuff, and this just gets the job done, and it doesn't hold your hands behind your back. It's really quite nice. DigitalOcean.com. Check it out, and use our promo code, Here's the Thing. They got some good tutorials, too. They got one stack deployments. You can do the entire application stack. They got some really good ones for, like, we talk about Mumble all the time. We just talked about Mumble last week. And if you wanted to set up, like, a voice chat server that uses all open source technology, you could go deploy a Mumble server with a single click on DigitalOcean. If you've got a Docker container you want to try out, again, single click. There's so many nice, like, try it. You can also, though, just deploy a base system, and it could be Ubuntu, it could be Debian, it could be Fedora, it could be Core OS, it could even be, if you're a little cray-cray, FreeBSD. In fact, they just put up a tutorial on how to configure encrypted ZFS pools with DigitalOcean block storage on FreeBSD. I know, it's crazy. They also have, this is actually pretty useful, a tutorial on managing MDADM, the RAID management tool, which I never pronounce out loud. They have a whole tutorial on how to use that on Ubuntu 16.04 up there right now, as well as setting up MariaDB, installing OwnCloud on Ubuntu 16.04, and others. Their tutorials are really nice because they're well done. They've been edited by professional editors. That's their full-time gig, and it's just part of what DigitalOcean has to offer. You combine that with the one-click applications, the crazy easy interface. Whenever you need infrastructure on demand, you spin it up. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code Here's the Thing to get a $10 credit and support the show. Mr. Noah, is there anything else you want to add? Because I know I went off.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with DigitalOcean. It may or may not be the case that while we are deep into troubleshooting a video problem, I may or may not have looked down and went, hey, I think we could do this on DigitalOcean. Look down, spin up a droplet. And like, as I look up, before you're even done with your sentence, we have a DigitalOcean droplet running, the very software that we are testing.
I love it.
That may or may not have happened this week.
That's what's so great. I mean, we talk about spinning up in less than a minute, and that's why it matters. Because faster than you can often install the packages on your local machine, you can have an entire droplet with a crazy fast internet connection that you can just destroy when you're done or put in production, and the pricing's totally great. DigitalOcean.com, go check them out. So our desktop app pick this week, it sort of was forced upon us, if you will, because it got some attention. It got some news in the last couple of days, and it helps kind of put it into context of what this particular tool is good for. Now, there's a lot of use cases for BleachBit, whatever. BleachBit, you're bleaching your bits. But the one that got a lot of attention this week was Hillary Clinton's team deleting all of her quote-unquote yoga emails using BleachBit. And since then, it's sort of been the one that everybody's talking about. And so I thought, you know what, why the hell not tell you about BleachBit, just in case you've been hearing the name and you're wondering what it is. It is a way to go through a lot of the temporary files on your system and clean them up. Logs, cache files. Are you familiar, Noah, with something called CCleaner or something like that? Have you ever used CCleaner?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. So CCleaner is a lot like BleachBit. I keep saying I keep saying it wrong because I typed it wrong. And once I type it wrong, that's how it's in my head. But it's bleach like the stuff that would kill you, and then bits like the stuff that's on your hard drive. You can figure it out from there, even if I stop saying it.
This is gonna show you how old I am. But the tool that I used back in my Windows days was System Mechanic. Which is kind of that's kind of the same thing as CCleaner. So I assume it's kind of the same as BleachBit.
Yeah. So when you launch it, here's what you get. So you get your standard check for updates, all that kind of stuff, hide irrelevant caches. But then if you look at this, it's gone through. It's found my bash history, evolution cache, Firefox, Chrome, GNOME, LibreOffice, system files like my packages, thumbnail cache. It'll even go through, and if you've like got a bunch of those crappy .ds store under ds_stores from a Mac, it'll go through and clean all those up if you got directories full of those. So it's kind of nice, and like they say on their website, it does like a full deletion. It goes in and wipes clean like 1,000 times over, can rewrite. It supports tons of applications, and they are loving the attention they've gotten. They're even reposting the videos of people talking about BleachBit on TV in context of Hillary Clinton. So why not give it a little attention this week? And I say good for them, because a lot of times open source projects get framed as these evil tools of hackers for lawbreakers. And instead of BleachBit hiding from the fame they're getting because Hillary Clinton used it to delete her emails, they're embracing it on their website and being like, this is the stuff the real criminals use. Check this out. Go here to get this tool and wipe all your stuff. In reality,
not only can you erase your data, you could even be the next president, even as a criminal. You can erase all of your history. No one will even know.
In reality, however, it's really just going through and cleaning up all of the junk that your applications leave behind. This is not something that your humble host, Chris, feels is all that necessary. Often, the point of a cache is that it self-maintains itself and keeps itself up to date with things that you access frequently, thereby making those things faster to access. So I'm not a huge deleter of cache. Every now and then, though, it's kind of nice. If you're a Google Chrome user, though, this isn't how you're going to hide your history. You also have to go clear your Google account history. Congrats to the BleachBit folks for taking the recent amount of press in stride, because they have been villainized a bit. And if you're looking for something to go through and clean up your old home directory, you've been running Firefox or Chrome or Flash videos, if you have the Flash plugin, it can clean that up too, which is actually kind of nice. Go check it out at bleachbit.org. And congrats to them for all the attention. It's always nice to see an open source project take it in stride. Now, Noah, I got something special for you. Mm-hmm. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for a special surprise.
I know you're a huge Plasma desktop user, all the time.
I have used it once.
Really?
No, twice. I used it once for a review, and then the second time, Michael Tunnell or Mitchell Tunnell asked me, sorry, I couldn't resist, told me that it would work really well on my netbook. So I had it on my netbook, and I ran it for like 2 weeks.
Jeez, we definitely need to do like when like 5.9 comes out or 6, I don't know. There's a point when in the Plasma, you and I need to live a month in Plasma because I go in and out from time to time. And I've had the pleasure of meeting the core developer behind this next project, super intelligent person. And this is one of those applications, if you're an Android user, that almost makes it worth using the Plasma desktop just on its own. Like, have you ever had like an app that's like, you'll switch everything for this one application?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Version 1.0 of KDE Connect is out. And this is that fancy software that essentially integrates all the best stuff about your Android device into your Plasma desktop. Everything from notifications to tethering to keeping the two to sharing the clipboard, everything between the two devices you'd ever want is delivered with KDE Connect. It's truly a different vision and a different take on convergence, where you have two different devices, but they have the same shared information. KDE Connect also just introduced new features, such as triggering custom commands from your phone. So you can pre-configure commands in KDE Connect desktop settings, so you can trigger them from your phone. Like, imagine that, like replying to an SMS message from your desktop, receiving desktop notifications on your phone, desktop notifications on your phone. It now uses TLS encryption, which I think it's used encryption for a while. It is so nice, and at the same time, they've managed to keep backward compatibility with older versions of KDE Connect and Android, which is not an easy thing to do. So KDE Connect, it brings all the stuff about Android that you might want to manage from your desktop right there. You get a notification on your Android device, you can clear it from your desktop, and vice versa. That alone makes KDE Connect worth it. All the other stuff it can do. It's such a cool tool. You can actually run it under GNOME, and there are some projects to do the same thing under GNOME, but KDE Connect 1.0, that's the official goodness. I think they just got a little bit of a boost from Google Summer of Code too, which is kind of nice. So check them out. We'll have a link in the show notes. KDE Connect. And if you and I ever do like another, like we're going to live on Plasma for like a month, that's one of the things you should definitely play with.
I will. I'll check it out.
It's really cool. Hey, Noah, did you know that you and I did a thing last week? We did a thing.
We did?
Yeah, we did.
We did that thing.
Brand new show, User Air. Noah, myself, and the Beard sat down and making his podcasting Jupiter Broadcasting debut. Rikai sat down and we did episode 1 of User Air, a new Linux-focused show on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. It totally has been a smashing hit. People have loved the first episode.
The thing is, the difference between User Air and this show, as I see it is like we call Linux unplugged, but even Linux Unplugged isn't really that unplugged. There's still a structure to it. This is truly a no structure show. And I think you tried to hit the no structure show with Tech Talk today, and then that morphed into a structured show. But this is like all over the place, all off the rails, just a couple of guys sitting down who like Linux, having a discussion over a beer.
Yeah, and what we're doing is we're sort of creating a different feel show here, and it's in some cases it's edited so we can kind of just sit there and relax and just talk, and then what you get is the best brought down version. Like I'll give you an example. Like episode 1 in reality was like an hour and 15 minutes long. But the published
could have easily done 3.
Oh yeah. But the published version was only an hour and 3. Like I took out a bit of parts where it just meandered and people would have gotten bored. So in episode 1, we managed to cover tiling window managers, which was great to get that discussion finally on the books. My experience with Linux on the MacBook. We talked about some new technology we're using on the network, and totally to my surprise, you and I got into our adventures with development and what you're doing and what I'm doing right now. And that was a great conversation, too. So User Air Episode 1 is already out. It comes out Wednesday mornings over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. All of the feeds are up. You can search for it in your favorite place that serves podcasts. And we'll be recording Episode 2 shortly after this episode of the Linux Action Show. So if you're watching live right now, stay tuned, and we'll be recording User Air 2 live in just a little bit. Brand new show, super focused on high quality audio, using a ton of new technology to record this thing. All of it Linux based, which we'll be talking about in the future. This show is our testing ground to literally, and I hope seriously, impact future podcasting. And this might be a long shot, but some of the stuff we're doing, I hope, could make Linux one of the go-to platforms for podcasts. In terms of content creators, you want to record a podcast? Here's a set of tools that Jupiter Broadcasting and other podcasters, which is great, are using. It's been working great for them. Here's an example of some of their shows. You just need these bits here, these bobs here. You connect it all together, and you're done. We're getting there. Like right now, you and I are having a video conference. Linux to Linux, high definition, using totally open source software. This show is being produced using a totally different set of technology. Again, all Linux based, open source to back end technology. We are writing new code to make some of it possible. It's super exciting, and the end result, not only is it a great experimentation in technology, but it's a really well put together, great sounding, engaging new podcast that comes from the perspective of Linux users. And I'm super happy with it turned out, and I can't wait to record episode 2, so go check it out. Error.show is the quick URL to go to if you like, and you can subscribe. We have links on the first show page, error.show, and error@jupiterbroadcasting.com is our email address, by the way, too. User error. Episode 1 is out. Go check it out. I'm super excited, and hopefully you'll like it, too. Okay, that's all the picks. Now, let's do the news.
The news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Everybody go to last.ting.com to support this show and get yourself $25 off a Ting phone or a Ting plan. Ting is mobile that makes sense. I've been using it for, I don't know, 2.5 years. I know you got to be around the same. You got to be clocking around 2.5 years too, right?
Yeah, I signed up the very first ad read that ever came out on Linux Action Show. I signed up at 3 a.m.
God, you are my favorite kind of listener right now. I just gotta say that.
Well, here's the thing. It's very simple. What it comes down to me is if I hear about something that would better serve my life and it's going to save me money, I have no choice but to jump on that right away. Yeah. And I was skeptical at first because the thing is I came from Verizon, right? And Verizon, what do they preach? Coverage. And I live in kind of a rural area.
Yeah, you
so
do.
Coverage is a big deal to me. And so I'm like, listen, I'm sure I could try this Ting thing, but the problem is who knows how well T-Mobile, who knows how well Sprint is going to work and where it's going to come. But the thing is, because there's no contract, you can get started for $6-7 a month. And what I did was I started with a flip phone and I just carried it with me alongside my main phone.
Did the Ting trial kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing was, it was a zero risk kind of a thing because if at the end of the day, if it didn't work out, I was out $6.
Yeah, and there's no early termination fee. There's no contract, so that's easy.
So the phone I bought was like $40, but I got my $25 credit from going to is it last.ting.com?
Yes, sir.
And so I got my $25 credit. So the phone ended up costing me like $25. Incidentally, later that year, like a couple months later, ended up like being like the thing that saved me when I was at Linux Fest Northwest and you got sick. And then I was able to use my Ting phone to coordinate. Yeah. And then shortly after that, I'm like, I realized that I wasn't even taking my Verizon phone with me anymore. I was doing everything. And but then I realized like I really missed having my smartphone.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, this is dumb. I should just get a smartphone on Ting. And haven't looked back since.
It's funny.
Well, until I got the GSM, and then it just took off in a whole nother direction.
So, Ting's been a sponsor for a while now because legitimately it just was a total game changer for me, and I have confidence that a lot of the audience thinks kind of like I do when it comes to this stuff. Like I know when to use Wi-Fi and when to use my mobile, and it's such a simple context mode switch for me that if that's all I have to do to save an astronomical amount on my wireless, I'm doing that, right? And so Ting was a no-brainer. And thinking back about it, I remember I kind of had sort of a first toe-in sort of experience like you. I had a Sprint. This is back when WiMAX was a thing. I had a Sprint Evo 4G.
Right.
And I took that thing from Sprint and I moved it over to Ting and I got the $25 credit. And so my first month was free. And I did the same thing you did, is I carried 2 phones for a little while. I had a work phone that was on one network and I had my Evo that was now on Ting. And by the end of it, I was only using the Evo. And it was a total game changer for me because that was also right when I was getting into CyanogenMod and a bunch of other stuff. And so not having my carrier trying to play Big Brother with me was extremely like just to get that weight off my shoulder, good feeling type scenario. And I love that about Ting. And then I was super passionate about Ting. And then guess what? Pretty soon after that, they became a sponsor. And one of the coolest things that I think has happened with Ting in a long time is they're getting really competitive now with their data prices. They've just dropped them. So data prices are now $10 per gigabyte once you go beyond the 1 gigabyte level.
Data is now cheaper on Ting. From now on, prices look like this. Need more? It's just $10 a gig. That's what new customers pay. Ow! That's what current customers pay. Me. It's simple. We like simple. See for yourself at ting.com/rates.
You know, I would keep an eye on the Ting blog too. Just even if you're not a Ting customer, they're giving away devices from time to time, and the entry is super easy. So start by going to last.ting.com and then go check them out. They got great devices, no contract, unlocked. You own them outright. Or
My
you can bring your own.
suggestion, if you want to get sold on Ting, is to go shop at other stores. No, I'm serious. And I mean this with all sincerity. Walk into AT&T and go look at their Go phone pricing. Then I want you to go over to Verizon and go look at whatever their equivalent pre-planned, no contract phone is. And just look at all of that, and that will sell you. That is what you need to do.
Also,
and you'll be sold on Ting in a second.
I will say this, too. If you, like myself, and I know Noah, if you get sort of stuck in the position in your family as the IT person that when you come there, you're solving their problems or giving their Android device more free space, that's my fun one right now, or fixing the problem on the PC, two things about Ting that are great for you. Number one, they have incredible customer service. So when Uncle Joe has a problem, you just have Uncle Joe call the Ting, and they have customer service that will make Uncle Joe feel like a king, and he's gonna call you up and tell you how great it was. And then later on, he might even get a special note in the mail it's really going to blow Uncle Joe's mind. And then number two, and this is sort of a big one for me, is when you move them over to Ting, the process is so simple for them to manage their accounts from the app on their device that they don't have to worry anymore about any of that stuff. They just look at the app on their device. They totally understand where their account is at. It's super, super simple, and it's really nice. But I would say, and this is kind of a third thing that Chris didn't tell you about, but it's something to know about, Ting has a really sweet affiliate account, and if you give them your affiliate URL, you're not going to be paying for wireless for a while. I'm just saying. So that's also, I'll put that out there. But anyways, big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the show. Go to last.ting.com to get started. You know, we're in a good mood today because, in part, it's Linux's birthday. And how can you not be happy when it's a birthday party? And the folks over at Red Hat did a happy birthday video. And I love it, Noah. Check this out.
Happy birthday to you.
So this is the CEO, Jim Whitehurst of Red Hat, singing.
Happy birthday to... You know, something's missing here, something strange. I think we could use, the community.
And they all run in with balloons.
Much better.
And a tux costume.
1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Linus. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah. 25th birthday, Noah. What do you think?
Nice.
Many more.
Here's the thing that's basically the kind of atmosphere and the kind of community thing that I think makes Red Hat so cool. The fact they do stuff like that.
Yeah, that was fun. It is pretty significant that you know what my first thought was? 25 years doesn't feel like that long in the terms of something that's historically important as Linux. It feels like it's just the beginning, which is incredible at 25 years for a piece of software.
You know what my first thought was?
What?
Nobody celebrates Microsoft's birthday. Nobody even knows how old Windows is. Nobody cares. Sorry. That was my first thought, though.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. So LinuxCon just wrapped up in Toronto, and I think they were celebrating it there too, which is pretty cool. And I wanted to start with something this week that I'm going to be honest. It actually legitimately upset me. I was really bummed out. There's something happening, and I've touched on it in bits and pieces here and there. Where we are demonizing in the press, and I say we very liberally, I do not mean the show. Linus is being turned into a monster. Linus is a rageaholic who will take shots at anyone and no one is safe. Linus is someone who is poisoning the open source ecosystem and driving away kernel contributors. Linus is a ticking time bomb. This is the meme that the media has been living on.
Violates safe zones.
Yeah.
And uses trigger words.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, trigger words. Yep. Now, I am not trying to downplay
inclusive language. I
am not trying to downplay anybody who has been in a position where something awful has happened to them and it's made them feel very crappy. But in the context of it being Linux's 25th birthday, I was super disappointed, and probably I took it more personally than I should have, to see this post from the Register this weekend. This was really something, and the title goes like this: having offended everyone else in the world, Linus Torvalds calls out his own lawyers as nasty, festering diseases. And then the subheadline: time for a compendium of abuse.
Wow.
So this is a real attack piece by the Register. It was written by Kareen, I think his name is Kareen McCarthy. And he says, coding curmudgeon Linus Torvalds has gone off yet on another rant, this time against his own lawyers and free software activist Bradley Kuhn. Now, right there, calling the Software Conservancy Linus's own lawyers is a massive exaggeration.
Misrepresentation, yeah.
Yes, that's a better word to use. Misrepresentation. Yes, that is a misrepresentation. So, okay. So anyways, we go on. He says, on a mailing list about an upcoming Linux conference, and this was, there is a conference that I was considering going, which I've kind of decided not to because I don't think it's appropriate for a podcast for media to be there. But there is a conference coming up called the kernel, like the plumbing conference. Like it's a kernel developers conference. It's all about the internals of Linux. Oh, and the other reason I don't want to go because it's just a bunch about embedded ARM devices. That would just bore me to death. But it's really for kernel developers to discuss kernel issues, and then it came up as, well, maybe we should have a discussion about GPL license compliance. That's where this conversation originated from. On a mailing list, this is going back to the article, about an upcoming Linux conference, a discussion about whether to include a session on the GPL that protects the open source operating system quickly devolved into an angry rant as the Linux founder piled in. Again, I think it's a misrepresentation to say that the conversation was about defending the GPL and defending enforcement. The conversation was about when you litigate this stuff, the damage it does to open source communities. That was the conversation, not GPL enforcement. Okay, I continue on. And this is a quote from Linus in the article. I actually think we should talk about GPL enforcement at the Kernel Summit because I think it's an important issue, Torvalds gently began. But we should talk about it in a way that we talk about other issues among kernel developers. No lawyers present unless they are in the capacity of a developer or a maintainer of actual code, and in particular, absolutely not the Free Software Conservancy.
Good. I agree. That makes perfect sense.
I personally think that arguing for lawyering has become a nasty, festering disease, and the SFC, the Software Freedom Conservancy, and Bradley Kuhn have been the typhoid Mary of spreading this disease. He goes on to say that that when the lawyers get involved around GPL enforcement, the communities around those projects die.
Yeah.
And what Linus does to sort of back this assertion up is he quotes Greg KH, who also agrees and says the same thing. But then he also points out to lawsuits brought in 2009 to defend the GPL around embedded Linux company BusyBox. The cases were brought by the Software Freedom Law Center. We've covered this lawsuit before. It was the VMware lawsuit. We've talked about this. And Torvalds has not been impressed with the results. He said, and I got to say something. When we covered that news story and said that they failed and that the guy didn't properly present evidence and that the entire lawsuit was dismissed, that was a loss for the GPL. Don't mistake. That was not a win for the GPL. The Software Conservancy went to war with VMware and lost on round one. Now I said in that original coverage there'll probably be a round two. But let's be clear. In round one, They screwed up. They didn't even supply proper evidence. Anyways, so Torvalds was not impressed by that case. I can understand why. He says, that may be a shining moment for the SFC, but it was not a shining moment for BusyBox. I'm not aware of anybody but the lawyers and crazy people that were happy about how BusyBox, the situation, ended up. Please pipe up if you actually know differently. All it resulted in was a huge amount of bickering, and both individual and commercial developers and users fleeing in droves. Both the original maintainer and the maintainer that started the lawsuits ended up publicly saying it was a disaster. Mm-hmm. Lawyers are poisonous to openness, poisonous to community, and poisonous to projects.
I agree with all of that.
Greg in the email thread said that Greg. If you want to read, I'll have it linked to the original thread. But Greg KH, maintainer of the LTS kernel, maintainer of the USB subsystem, guest on the Linux Action Show in the past. Greg KH said, "Look, when these companies that refuse to enforce the GPL, when they come at us and they get in our face and they say make us enforce it, or sue us, you know what happens?" And this is Greg. This is not me saying this. Greg says, we spend a lot of time and a lot of years working with those companies, and we turn them into some of the biggest GPL open source contributors out there. And he cites examples of this. He cites examples where companies got in Greg's face and said, we will never support the GPL. This is our code. Take us to court. And now they're some of the biggest contributors to the Linux kernel. And Greg says what we do is we work with these people behind the scenes. And when you start this lawsuit business, these companies, they shut down. They don't communicate anymore with developers. Right. They got to protect themselves. And he lays out the business rationale why it's a horrible idea to pursue these lawsuits over this compliance stuff all the time.
But basic humanity dictates that when you got a problem with John next door, walk over to John next door and say, John, I have a problem. Can we hash this out before you go hire a lawyer and sue John next door for doing, you know what I mean? The
real message though, and this is what I kind of want to get your opinion on. Greg and Linus's message was simply, let the developers hash it out with the other developers, because when we work developer to developer, that breeds a culture inside the company that eventually leads to compliance.
Right.
Is that realistic, or is there a place for the lawyers to get involved? They might not be creating code. They might not be managing community. They might not be packaging software. They might not be writing documentation. But Noah, they're defending the license.
Yeah, sure they are. Here's the thing: the basic essence is that when these developers work, they can hash things out, and I think that's a very realistic model to work things out. And I think that applies beyond just developers. I think just being a human and going to another human and working out an issue is a much better way to deal with something versus litigation. But
I think they would argue that if you don't enforce the GPL, then it's essentially toothless and it's meaningless.
That's great. And if it comes to that, then maybe we do need to enforce the GPL. But let's try the reasonable soft approach first. If that doesn't work, we can back up.
That's my point.
Here's the problem with lawyers. The problem with lawyers, and I have plenty of lawyers that work for me, and I've got one that I work with a lot, and I really like him, and then I've got one that we use for nasty stuff, and he's so mean I don't even like him. But
just what you want.
But you have to have somebody like that. But the thing is they have a vested interest in finding you a problem because they can bill you to solve the problem. And if you don't recognize that and you don't acknowledge that, then you're naive. So the lawyers, they don't care. I don't believe there are a lot of lawyers. There might be some, but I think most of them don't actually care about the betterment of the community and the bigger picture. What they care about is, I want to win this case so I can bill the client and I have a win in my belt. And that kind of attitude has no place in the open source community. In fact, it's the antithesis, is the opposite of the culture that we're trying to create.
We want collaboration.
So it has to be the absolute last resort. And
you and I can touch on these points, but Greg KH in that mailing list, man, he broke it down from a total CEO level position of why this makes sense. It's beautiful, and it's exact. And Linus liked it so much that Linus quoted Greg's entire email in Linus's email thread. So, okay, now let's pause there, because I think you and I are in agreement there, and people will probably disagree with us, but I want to move forward because I want to refocus us back on the attack against Linus. And I think this is extremely unfortunate, because you take this conversation that we're having, you can see there's legitimate sides to this conversation, this back and forth that Noah and I just had, and there's legitimate reasons why Linus and Greg would feel this way. This article does not address any of those. It starts from a point of assumption that Linus is wrong, doesn't ever even give Greg's point of view any airtime at all, and continues to attack him. So it says later on that the fire wasn't burnt out. And then it goes and quotes some of the kind of like swear words that Linus used. And then it fills in details like neurons firing and bouncing on the inside of Linus's head. Is a quote from the article where they're drawing a picture of Linus in a state of rage, where his mind is firing on all cylinders, where he's just absolutely so upset. They paint this picture for you, and then once they're done painting that picture, she or he literally lays out bullet point after bullet point of any time Linus has gotten upset, and then has a heading that says, let's keep going, and then does another list, bullet point by bullet point, of every time Linus has got upset, and then ends it with, sigh.
The thing is, I think, first of all, I think if you actually listen to what Linus says at any time, or if you listen to what the kind of attitude that he has, I don't think he's really that emotionally invested in anything, right?
No, in fact, I think people would be a little disappointed to find out how little he is actually emotionally invested.
I don't think he really cares, and I don't think he really cares what they write. And you know what? The thing is, the reason that he uses coarse language, and the reason that he comes off and is very poignant and very sharp in his words, is because that's the best kind of teeth he can have.
And that's the part where he does care too. That's the part where he does care. I also, and here's why I'm upset. No, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little upset about this because, so one of the things I do is I watch a story for the show, and then I watch all of the stories about that story and all of the reaction about that story, so I can try to incorporate that into the analysis for the show. And one of the things that upset me on Twitter is I saw other quote-unquote Linux journalists, like Christine Hall from Phosphorus here, quotes, this is her Twitter feed, Torvalds needs to rethink this position. Linus Torvalds calls down his own lawyers as nasty, festering disease. That's not true. That is simply not. They're not personally. They're not his personal lawyers. They're not his lawyers. And
number two, he didn't even call the lawyers. He said their actions are a festering pool, not the people. That's not even accurate.
And there has been this, Linus is anti-GPL, Linus is anti-community, Linus is aggressive narrative building now for months.
The man who gave a multi-million-dollar idea away to the community is anti-community.
And
that makes a lot of sense.
Just this week, and Swampy has an article about it, just this week, Linus was quoted as saying the GPL was the defining factor in Linux's success. And if it wasn't for the GPL2, we wouldn't have Linux. And I quote, I love the GPL2. That was Linus's direct quote. So not only at LinuxCon, not only at LinuxCon this week was he advocating for the GPL and saying that it was the defining factor of Linux's success. While he's saying this, these hit pieces are being written. And I don't understand what the end goal is here. There seems to be some sort of shared goal to take Linus out of action as the head of Linux, and I can't understand what it is. I understand he swears. I understand he upsets people. But I will be honest with you, in literally every single case, I have read the entire thread, I have gone back and read people's previous threads, and in every case, while his reaction seems extreme, it seems completely founded and logical if you don't just read the news and you actually read the mailing lists.
Right. Not to mention, if you don't, first of all, if you're on the mailing list, it's because you want to be involved with the project. If you don't agree with the fundamental way that the leader of a project then go work somewhere else. And second of all, this is a great thing. It's the anti-Linus button. If you don't like what he says, there's a hotkey, Alt F4, and it automatically removes all the content that he says.
So I thought Simon Phelps had one of the best takes. You know, again, I like to watch. I watch everybody as they react to these stories, and if we have private conversations where I grouse about it, but then I sort of distill it all down to an analysis for the show. And I thought Simon's was worth just bringing right up to the forefront. This is how Simon Phipps put it, and I thought this was brilliant. Linux's high elders discuss if GPL compliance is best sought via relationships or lawsuits. Read it here in this thread. That's that's literally the core issue here. They're trying to the people at the top of the contribution chain are trying to figure out if it's best to do long-term relationships with these companies or sue the shit out of them. That's the discussion, and it gets turned into Linus hates his own lawyers and thinks they're scum. And it's disgusting to watch that, especially on the 25th birthday of Linux. I mean, give me a break. For 1 week, couldn't we have let off?
And to be fair, I mean, I'll just say it because it hasn't come up. You can find a lot worse things he said than that. I mean,
it's true.
That seems actually pretty tame.
Yeah, just ask NVIDIA. So our friends over at Ubuntu Mate have some great news. Bitemark is sponsoring some of their back-end infrastructure. So Bitemark is as a company that offers, it's a lot like a DigitalOcean over in the UK. They offer like VPSs on demand and stuff that look really competitive. SSDs, they say a couple of weeks ago, Bitemark managing director Matthew, I'm going to say Bach? Maybe Wimpy could tell us on Linux Unplugged. He contacted Ubuntu Mate team and offered free hosting for the project. As of August 18th, 2016, all the Ubuntu Mate infrastructure is now hosted on Bitemark cloud servers. And Bitemark announced, they say, I'm happy to announce that Bitemark is supporting the Ubuntu Mate operating system project, which is based on traditional computing desktop. We're providing hosting for its community forums and wiki and bandwidth for its very popular Raspberry Pi edition. Very nice. Wimpy, a.k.a. Martin, added, I'm absolutely delighted that Bitemark reached out to Ubuntu Mate and generously offered to cover all hosting and bandwidth requirements. We now have a resilient pair of geographically separated cloud servers powering the Ubuntu Mate websites, community forums, and Raspberry Pi image downloads. This will enable Ubuntu Mate to channel far more of its money raised via our crowdfunding into sponsored development of Ubuntu Mate desktop and related projects. That, I think, is the key part. That's what's super exciting for me is there is a spot for corporate sponsorship for open source projects like this.
Sure.
Especially ones like Bitemark, and I'll say DigitalOcean, who sponsors a shit ton of open source projects too, where they come in and they're just like, just keep doing what you're doing. We're not going to ask anything of you. It's just, thanks for doing that. And I think, Noah, you've probably felt like you've been in this position before at Altispeed. Like, there's probably been open source projects where you're like, hey, you know what? Altispeed doesn't want you to do anything. I just want to kind of write you a check and say thank you for doing this.
Sure. I mean, so from a high level, that's great. When it comes down to the nitty gritty, you get into the accountant level. I have to be able to show some sort of ROI, right? And so if I go in, like, if I'm going to give money to a place, I have to be able to show how we made money. That's just a function of being a Type C corporation. But most of the projects that we're willing to contribute are things that we have taken in many times what we have given already, and then we just give back a little bit. Right?
Yeah, like for Bitemark.
Ballistic could be a great example.
Or like at Bitemark, if they're using Ubuntu Mate internally as their desktop for their employees.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a total but I guess the thing I really like about this story is and Elementary OS has sort of had some of the similar. I think DigitalOcean hosts some of their stuff for them. And there's other. I mean, this is a project. This story goes on a lot. A lot of times, what happens, and I think this is really super awesome, is an open source project gets to a certain amount of prevalence and. At a certain level, somebody in one of these companies is like, hey, I'm a fan of that project. I love that project. They come in, like Bitemark did, and they support that project sort of like ongoing base foundational costs, infrastructure, download bandwidth, stuff like that.
Right.
That lets the open source project take that crowdfunding and directly say, now we're going to pay coders. Now we're going to actually buy some time from somebody to write this code for us. And if you think about it, that's going to translate to much bigger improvements to Ubuntu Mate down the road. And that's why I think it's a great story, is we could literally see Ubuntu Mate getting some big investments. And I would say this, just watching Wimpy for all this time, he's been a very savvy investor. He does monthly updates on what he's doing with the community's money. And he so far seems to have spent it in ways that haven't just made a better distribution for Ubuntu Mate users, but have improve the Mate desktop in some big ways that will make it relevant now for years. And it's just it's sort of awesome to see this happen. So congratulations to them. And I think the big picture story, the meta story here is Ubuntu Mate just sort of close the next round that's going to make them an even more sustainable long-term distribution. So now you have a traditional desktop environment that you can depend on that has some financial backing and savvy leadership combined. Should mean this is one of those distros that is in for another decade. I mean, you think about how many distros do we see come and go over a 10-year period, and there's some fundamental things that make them more sustainable than others, and I think this is one of them. So congrats to the project, and if Wimpy wants to join us on Unplugged on Tuesday, I would be thrilled to hear more about it. So, last but not least, and this is perfect after last week's episode where you talked about continuing to use OwnCloud, there is a new version of Nextcloud out. Version 10 has released. And I got to say, Noah, check out these features. So, first of all, they're going to have file access control and automatic file tagging. Nextcloud gives administrators control over data access by enabling them to define strict rules. So you can set up scenarios and rules for files, and then Nextcloud will enforce them via the administration UI. The workflow engine expands these capabilities, enabling administrators to start to add any kind of actions based on these triggers. For example, converting certain files to PDF upon uploading to the server and then emailing them. That could be useful. And then also you can do, based on tags, you could have it send to multiple email addresses. That's a very nice feature. Going on, though, I think this is kind of slick. Look at this bad mamma jamma. Nextcloud 10 introduces a server information app, which provides a way for admins to monitor the health and performance of Nextcloud. Besides a graphical UI, which does look kind of badass, an API endpoint is provided to allow you to integrate your own cloud server monitoring into your overall monitoring infrastructure. So say you're using OpenNMS or Nagios, you can now integrate different metrics of your own cloud instance into your overall monitoring infrastructure. Huge for enterprises, but huge also for those that want to offer hosted Nextcloud instances. That's a really big deal. And I like that UI too. I recognize that open source project, but I can't put my finger on it. So, Joss, if you could maybe tweet me or something, let me know what project you guys are integrating there. It looks familiar, but I'm not placing it.
I definitely want to. My first step, obviously, is I have to actually get to Nextcloud, right? I'm still using OwnCloud. And to be honest with you, because of my previous experiences with OwnCloud, I'm a little afraid to change anything or do anything. Like, I guess 80% of me is rational and understands that they've probably made some major improvements, which is why I haven't had any problems. But there's 20% of me that is afraid that I have some sort of magical install, and if I tried to replicate,
well, you're mostly using it for file sync, right? You're not taking advantage. Yeah. So if you were using OwnCloud in any other capacity, I would say you are really screwing up. I would say you're blowing it big time. If you are out there and you're using Nextcloud or OwnCloud in any way that you should be, don't be like Noah. If you're just using file sync, you could be using anything in the world, and there's better solutions than OwnCloud, Nextcloud, I think. But if you want to take advantage of all the features that OwnCloud or Nextcloud have via the web UI, be it calendaring or group contacts or file management or any of that stuff,
then you definitely want to be on the
you
newest
want
one,
to kind of keep up to date.
Sure.
But for you, Noah, you could go throw up a Nextcloud 12 server in a year and move your files over and you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's the first step before I can actually start taking advantage of some of this other stuff. I have to go. I'd have to make it to about a year with actually having sensitive data before I'd fully trust it, just because I've been burned so many times.
Yeah. And the problem is in that period of time, you kind of want to stay up to date. I want to just give a quick shout out and then we'll move on. They now have Samba change notification support, which improves performance for large Windows network drives. Huge, I think, for some of you out there. They've removed the need for periodic scans of storage systems. Nextcloud 10 lowers the load on both Nextcloud and storage servers and removes the risk of conflicting changes due to long duration of rescans. I know from the emails I've received that's a big feature for some of you out there. And changes have been made to other external storage providers, including Dropbox and Google Drive, speeding up access to those services, while full UTF-8 support for external storage reduces risk of access issues to non-standard file names. Anyways, a bunch of nice changes, including two-factor authentication support via a plugin and all that kind of stuff. So pretty solid. This is, I would say, the second really solid update we've seen since the Nextcloud OwnCloud fork. So, and I have not really followed OwnCloud as closely. I see they've come out with their own version of events, which might be worth people looking into. But I don't know if I've seen as many releases. I don't know. I might be wrong on that. But the Nextcloud guys, 2 releases in a row that look really solid. So Nextcloud 10 is out. Congrats to them. And we have more information in the show notes if you would like it. All right. Anything else, Noah?
That's it for me.
All right. Then that's all the news for this week. Ryan Cypes is about to join us and tell us about his big news and also correct the record, apparently, from our rant, quote unquote, from last week's episode on the Internet of Things.
Our rant?
I was trying to take some of the heat for you, buddy. All right. Well, I guess a lot of people were listening and had to rage quit the episode. They were so upset. So we're going to correct the record and see, can really even consumers, quote unquote, Internet of Things, get along and play with Linux? But first, we have to say thank you to the great folks over at Linux Academy. LinuxAcademy.com/unplugged is where you go to support this show and learn more about the platform designed to teach you all of the things around Linux. Beginner essentials, basic things that'll just help you learn Linux, but also extremely advanced topics and the entire technology stack around Linux. In fact, if you go over to linuxacademy.com/unplugged, dig around and look at their features page. Learn about their labs and exercises where you have hands-on scenario-based labs to give you experience with real servers. The video courses, the self-paced in-depth video courses on every topic, cloud, Linux, DevOps, AWS, Azure's also in the Linux Academy repertoire. Nuggets are tiny bits of sparkly wisdom to give you a deep dive into a single topic. Note cards that can be forked by the community, and the community stacked full of Jupiter Broadcasting members. And Learning Pass, if you have a mind of what you want to accomplish. Series of courses and content planned by instructors. Oh, and I should mention, instructor mentoring is available too. This is a great system that spins up Linux systems on demand, created by Linux enthusiasts, developers, and educators that came together and created the Linux Academy platform. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. Go there, learn more about Linux Academy, increase your skill set to the next level. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. Sometimes we cover topics and you want to know more about it. That's a great resource to check out. Thanks to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. Well, we should say right now that it is a big day on the show because Ryan is here not only to talk to us about the Internet of Things, and which is sort of an area of expertise of his, but also about his big news about his future plans. Ryan, welcome to the Linux Action Show, sir.
I'm glad to be back.
It is good to have you. So I have a sense there may be a bit of an announcement. Last we spoke, you had moved on and had left Mycroft, and there was a hint in the air that something may be coming down the pipe, and I'm wondering if you're willing to share it now with us, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. As of last week, about Tuesday, I have joined System 76 as their community manager.
Hey-o! Very nice. Congratulations, Ryan. That's first of all, having just worked with System 76 for like a decade and having visited their office, I think it was, what did we go in October? It was something like
last year in November, yeah.
Yeah, November, and Ryan was there. I mean, just one of the things I took away is what a great team they are together and what a great corporate culture they have, which is there's no way to put that on the website, really. There's no way to sort of advertise that. But they have one of the most cool organic corporate cultures that I think really, really promotes innovation. So I'm guessing you probably picked up on some of that too when you were visiting.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever we went out there, you remember the conversation that we had where they kind of opened up the floor for every visitor of the Supervan event to share their ideas. And we hung out with them, and I got a really good sense that they are forward-looking, and everybody there has a really great head on their shoulders. And so whenever I left Mycroft, I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to do next. And I ended up calling up Carl, and this is all detailed in my blog in great detail. But I ended up heading out there and hanging out with him. And after some conversations over some beers, I realized that their vision and my vision for open source hardware and the future of Linux very much aligned. And so that led to me being here right now. And this is really great. Like I talked to you about or teased a little bit, System 76 has a few interesting projects coming down the pipe. They have a secret lab where...
Oh, really? A secret lab, a skunkworks, right?
Yeah, where things are being built, future things. And I and Carl and Ian and Jason were so gracious to take me in there and show me what they were working on.
Oh, you got to go in the secret lab.
Yeah, and I was very impressed. And I thought this is good. This is what the future looks like. And so I was very excited when Carl asked me, well, what would you do if you came and joined the team? And I said, help promote this stuff, share the word about what's going on here, and what a great culture you guys have, and what projects you've been working on. And I'm super excited. I get so energized talking to everybody on the team and listening to their ideas and sharing my ideas. And it's been a whole heck of a lot of fun this past week, and I look forward to sharing my plans and some of the neat stuff that we're doing with the world. And that starts here.
Wow.
But
it's funny, Ryan, when you announced you were moving on from Minecraft, I hadn't really pegged System 76, even though in retrospect it makes sense, because I would say if I have one criticism of them as a company, it's that they aren't able to fully promote how much work they do, how they do that work, how meticulous they are about it, and at the level and working upstream and all of that they do, because they're so heads down on the day-to-day task that they just don't really have a way to communicate that. And that's not even necessarily marketing, because it's not something that the majority of users would fully understand. But when I went there, and I know Noah was impressed too, just the system they use to deploy images to their workstations to do testing, and all of that was so meticulously thought out. And they're constantly working on projects that go back upstream that they don't really have time to talk about. So there is going to be a bit of a transformation that might have to happen for a community manager role to fully blossom there, because it's just not an area they've had a lot of time to probably dedicate to in the past. What are your thoughts on that?
We talked about, when I got there, one of the things I talked about was, you have so much content. You have so much content here that you could share with the world. And I kind of asked, what's the deal? Why is this, the stuff that your guys are doing here, the great things that they're creating, the great projects that they're spearheading, why are these things not getting shared out? And Carl was pretty frank. He said, really, we're like you said, we're so heads down. We haven't really had the bandwidth to share this with the world. And I said, I would love to have an opportunity to go through and see if we could share this and bring people in. And it may come as a surprise to some people, it may not, but they also have developed quite a bit of software, like you were pointing out, that helps them do their daily jobs. And a lot of that software can be promoted as well. A lot of that software would be really useful to other people trying to build communities and companies built on open source. And so that's going to be part of my focus. The other part is getting feedback from users and seeing how we can improve the products and really make a difference. I wouldn't have joined if I didn't think that System 76 has a really distinct opportunity. And I think that opportunity is to become a really big force in computing. As a company, they are in a really, really good place, both from their culture and also from a monetary standpoint. And also
I would say from sort of a long-term vision standpoint.
Yeah, Carl is an excellent leader, and everyone within the organization has a really good sense of where they're going, and they stick to that vision. And that's something that you really have to admire about them. When people are talking about what I would consider to be kind of fads, they stick to the vision. And you oftentimes use this example of like a truck, and a car. And a lot of the computing devices that get a lot of attention are these cars, and they're just your standard like consumer level. I'm going to consume content on this thing. And what System 76 has been making has been things for makers, things that you can use to actually create something, and it has the power that you need and all the things that you would expect to be able to just get done.
I like, Carl said to me, and we were talking in the past, and I've heard him say it to other people, that his mindset's always people could use more computing power. They can always use more power. Don't give them less powerful machines. And the new Oryx that just got updated with the GTX 10 series GPU, yeah, that's turning my head. I would love a 10 series GPU in a mobile workstation. They would make some of the OBS work on the road so much more feasible. Oh man, this is a nice looking rig. And by the way, none of this is sponsored. This is all, we're giving this to System 76 absolutely free. If anything, you could say it's costing me money because I should be charging them for all this plugin.
I'd vote that they earned it.
I agree. That's exactly why we're doing it. This is legit, and I'm super excited for Ryan because I think they're a company that's been, in a position, Noah, for a while now that hasn't fully gotten the recognition they get. A lot of people go, oh, well, they're just repackaged and relabeled Clevos, and these people have no idea what they're talking about.
Interestingly enough, it's gotten to the point now where I can't even stand to have a I used to go and explain that. I'd go in and say, well, that's you don't even know what you're talking about, and let me explain why. And I'd go through the entire explanation. I can't even stand to do that anymore
because it
drives me nuts. Yeah. And the other thing is, when people do idiotic things when people say idiotic things like that, when they say things like, oh, they're just rebranding computers and selling cheap junk that they install Linux on and hack together stuff. When you say that, you're not only exemplifying your own ignorance, but you're also insulting their integrity. And if you ever go and meet these people and sit down in their office, people think I'm a zealot when it comes to running. I'm serious. I mean, the people are like, oh, Noah's, he refuses to use anything else. Yeah, go visit System 76 for a little bit and see what you think. I mean, they are converting people from Linux. They converted the guy who sells the alcohol downstairs. And then once they convert him to Linux, they gave him a job. And stuff like that is just, it's never going to be fun. That's just not something they're going to talk about. And there's really no way for them to talk about it. And then you started talking about their provisioning system. If you've ever had to work in a corporate environment where you have Pixie booting and stuff like that, that's nothing. It's got nothing on their system. They have a specified VLAN, they plug a system in, they push a key combination, and boom, now the computer has 1404, all the drivers, all the little tweaks, everything's done. Boom, you push the button again, now it's 1604 and again, nothing that ever really they're going to get any attention of. And it's like a world-class enterprise grade system, and nobody knows about it.
Well, I'd like to say too that, when you buy a machine and you're like, wow, I got this new insert computer name here, and you sit down and you install Ubuntu on it or Arch or anything, and you find, oh man, wireless doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Like, that is the most frustrating thing, because you're so happy to have your new machine, and then you put the operating system that you want to run on it on the machine, and something doesn't work. And
I've just gotten used to putting my own wireless cards in when that happens.
Yeah, and then I talk to them and I watch their process, and they spend so much time meticulously making sure that all of the hardware in this machine is supported, and if there needs to be, they put together a repository full of the drivers. They make sure it's updated. They try to stay on top of making sure that it's always working. So they're testing, the newest version of Ubuntu, and they're testing all these things to make sure that they can get ahead of any changes that are made upstream to make sure that their hardware always works. I remember talking to Matt Hartley, and he said that, they pushed down something messed up, and then like a few hours later, he got an update from their repository that fixed whatever messed up. And that's the type of hard work that they put into making sure that you don't have to worry about your hardware, and you shouldn't have to worry about your hardware. You should be able to just jump on your machine, get shit done, and know that it's going to work. Yeah. And that's the experience that you get when you buy a System 76 machine. And that's honestly what we deserve. That's what we as Linux users deserve. Mm-hmm.
I think it's the point I've made a long time. It's like you want to have that almost MacBook-like out-of-the-box experience. And you have to there's other vendors out there for sure that are doing this, but there's a real value in a company that's been in it for the long haul. So Ryan, I am super excited for you. And maybe if this podcasting gig doesn't work out, they can open up a position for Noah and I someday. But while we were talking about hardware that you just want to work and get and just get your shit done, that might be a good spot to transition to Internet of Things, because last week the conversation basically devolved from I was thinking about picking up physical hardware switches, so that way I could manage my Hue lights that are controlled over Wi-Fi. And Noah, you kind of thought that was crazy.
So let me recap, and then you guys can take points of discussion. What I have a fundamental problem with is the idiotification of people through the masses. And so when they come out with these smart controlled, Wi-Fi controlled, whatever controlled things, that's problem one I have. Problem two is I don't like things that happen that I'm not aware of. So when you have some sort of light switch and you put it in and it calls out to home to some server, and then that server then brokers a connection to some sort of app, and all this stuff is happening up and I don't have control over that. If I'm not actually forwarding a port over to an IP address that I have set onto a device, if I'm not controlling that traffic, I have a problem with that. That's problem two. And then problem three is I have a problem with things that aren't standard. So if I think the thing that originally started this discussion was a viewer sent in some other kind of remotely controlled light, and they're like, here you go, and you're like, it's some sort of smart control light, and you download some sort of app and do it.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that. Things have to fit some sort of a standard so that everything works together.
Now, I guess before I go all like, oh, Noah's a curmudgeon and he doesn't like technology and he doesn't like new things, I feel like we should disclaim that we have done literally an entire episode dedicated to going through all of the automation in your house. And I assume that is continued.
Every light is controlled by a computer.
Right.
That computer, though, sits on its own separate VLAN, and I control which devices have access to that machine.
Right.
And it's and the app has there's.
But it's not just lights in your house. It's locks, it's motion sensors, it's alarms. You have key card access. I mean, out of anybody, you probably have some of the most standing in terms of automating not just your house, but your office and your clients. But really, I mean, your whole damn house is wired up. And yet, I find it ironic that you're one of the most vocal. I don't know if anti-advocate is a word.
Well, you can say it. Anti-IoT. I am anti-IoT.
And I think part of your main concern is us as consumers have no control over these things. Really, it goes through a proxy. Yes. Now Ryan is joining us to tell us. Well, hey, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe there is some other things out there, like things like Z-Wave that could bring all of these things under one umbrella. Am I kind of grokking what you're putting down, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. If you scroll down on the Z-Wave page and you look at, there we go, right there.
Z-Wave, yep.
It talks about real quickly about the different, the Amazon Echo and the Apple Watch and all sorts of different devices that help you, that use the Z-Wave protocol to allow you to control the devices in your house. And when I was writing skills for Mycroft, I have Philips Hue lights, and I have we bought some other random lights that are like the off-brand, and I can't even remember the different brands.
Yeah, I know there's a lot.
but I made sure that they used the Zigbee or the Z-Wave protocol so that I would be able to control them using something like, for instance, like the SmartThings hub. If you go to like the Samsung SmartThings hub, contains both a Zigbee and a Z-Wave radio, and if you're familiar with these standards, they're like Wi-Fi, or some other radio.
And you find that there's a lot of adoption across the industry for this stuff.
But hold on. Let's break this down a little bit. So first of all, when you say that these devices, there's a big difference between being a Zigbee device or supporting Zigbee. I'll give you an example. Crestron, for example, supports Zigbee. I can tie Zigbee stuff into a Crestron system, but Crestron is not a Zigbee system. Crestron has their own protocol and their own system for communicating to all of this stuff. They just happen to support Zigbee. So my first question is, just because, when it comes to like, and I don't know a whole lot about the Internet of Things, individual devices, but take one of these lights and you can pick one. The first question I would ask you is, does it communicate in any other way other than just straight up Zigbee?
It depends on the device. For instance, like my Philips Hue lights, I want to say that they're Zigbee, but I'm not sure. But
they're Zigbee. They support Zigbee anyway.
But as far as I can tell, they just communicate over Zigbee. Well, what else would they? They're plugged in just to the power.
Philips app.
Right, but you use a hub, but you don't have to use the Philips Hue hub. You can use other hubs. There's even open source, applications like OpenHab and Home Assistant, and then I've even seen those paired with Raspberry Pis with like a Zigbee radio, or a Z-Wave radio, little like USB plug-in for controlling them.
My point is, and I don't know the answer to this question, but my question is, if so, I'll give you an example of where I would be opposed to it. If you have a given light and you could use another hub, and so it supports Zigbee, but it also supports proprietary standard XYZ that ships with it, and that's how whatever the app that comes with that light, which in smaller things, if that supports that device, is totally out of. I'm totally against that device.
Yeah, so
you don't know when it's going to talk. You don't know if it somehow gets an internet connection or somebody brings that hub in, or that. Yeah. I'll give you an example of where this actually bit me. We bought this baby monitor thing. It was a little video baby monitor thing, right? Yep. And what happened was, and I being all against Internet of Things and all this, I didn't have it connected to anything. But because the radio frequencies are absolutely identical and there's no encryption between those things, I'm getting my neighbors down the street. Yes. I'm receiving their signal. So I am inside there. That woman goes to breastfeed her kid, or my wife goes to breastfeed our kid, and now it's being broadcasted all over the neighborhood. And so I want to know exactly how these devices are communicating, and I want to make sure that it can only communicate with the device that I tell it can, not just if. So for in my hypothetical example, if you have one of these lights and it goes to communicate with one of these hubs, does it have to be paired to that hub, or does it talk to if somebody else has a hub, will it talk to it? Those kind of things. Those are the things I want to know, and until I have a clear understanding of how that technology works, I don't want to use it.
Yeah, I know that there's been some conversations. I wish I could remember who I was talking to, but she works for some agency in Washington D.C. that does like policy around this stuff, and she was telling me that there's been a lot of conversations around encrypted communications between these devices and the hubs.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that too.
I don't know what the timeline is on that. I don't know what the conversation looks like around that. I wish I could remember what my setup process was with the Philips Hue hub. Like I don't remember if I went through a pairing process or not, now that you mention it.
So here's what it sounds like to me, Ryan, is it sounds like these devices support other management protocols as long as the vendor decides to implement those protocols. And so if that's the case, then we as consumers, if we do want these quote-unquote Internet of Things where your locks and your lights and there's probably many other good examples you might want to make, we should be buying the ones that enable this other types of management, because we have to vote with our wallet here. Because what I'd be afraid of is a vendor comes along and makes it crazy cheap and easy, but it only works with their system. Like say like a Google Assistant comes out, and the Google Assistant has its own protocol, and only devices that support that can work with it. So all major vendors start putting their energy there instead of, say, something open and freely available to people. So what do you think? Is there a balance there that if we're not careful, we might lose this interoperability, or do you feel like it's pretty well entrenched?
No, that's why I'm wanted to come on here and talk. I'm very happy that it looks like at this point that two open protocols, Z-Wave and Zigbee, that you can implement on your own devices, or on, or you can grab like some random hub that some white label company made, or some third party that you've never heard of, but it has the features that you want, created. That to me is interesting and powerful, and something that I'm happy about, because what I originally assumed before I actually looked into it was that the Philips Hue stuff only worked with the Philips Hue stuff, and they were using their own like made up protocol. Yeah, right. And I was worried about that if I got like a Smart Things hub, that I wouldn't be able to use anything that wasn't Samsung, and I was wrong about that. And as I looked into Home Assistant and what they were using, like the different APIs that they were using and the different different products that it worked with, I was getting really excited.
How is it communicating those APIs?
So it's every single one is implemented differently. Right. So you have to look in a case by case basis.
How do I talk from one device to the other?
So when with specifically Home Assistant, you have to actually like go through on a skill by, I call them skill, plug-in by plug-in basis and set it up, which it does kind of suck. But,
And Home Assistant is the open source home automation platform that lets you manage all these different devices in one open source. It's like central spot.
Right. And it tells you how to, I was looking at the documentation, but it's been a couple months now, but it tells you how to connect to a different hub or set up I saw somebody's tutorial on setting up like a Raspberry Pi as your hub. And that to me was really interesting because you were talking about how you don't want it to be tied into like some cloud service or whatever.
Right.
That's an opportunity to do that, but it wouldn't be possible if these protocols were all
allow me to clarify. Not only am I against tying it in tying it into a cloud service, I'm against even passing a single byte of information I don't want it leaving my house. So even if it's as simple as you have to generate a key for this one to talk to that one, and so you go to manufacturer's website and type in your serial number, and then it generates this little key, and then you put it in. I've seen systems that do something like that. Even that I'm against. And the reason for that is because I'm a 10-year kind of guy. I buy a TV, I put it on the wall, I want it there for 10 years. I buy a light switch, I put a light switch in my house, it better be there for 20 years. I am not going to replace all of my stuff in my house every 3 years as this stuff gets updated. And so if a company goes out of business that is required for me to use any of this stuff, I'm against that as well.
Yeah, you should. And that's why I'm so excited. If Z-Wave and Zigbee stick around, which who knows if they will.
They've been around for 10 years, yeah.
But assuming that they do, that is what excites me because then I can kind of make those decisions and not worry about, if I order this random thing online and it's by, GE or whatever, I'm not going to be able to use it. And that's exciting to me.
I did have an experience, and it wasn't Zigbee, it was X10, but I did have an experience where it was a security system, and the idea behind the security system was it communicated over X10, and so I control the lights. And so I used that logic. I was like, well, it doesn't matter if this company exists or not because I'll be able to. It runs over X10. Well, it turns out the way that the system got active and the way that you had to pair the little sensors of the security system up, you had to use it had to call out to the internet and use their stupid service to pair the thing. So even though I could control all of my X10 stuff with this box, it didn't work as a security system anymore. So it's not enough just to say, does it support an open standard? And so then I'll be able to carry on even if the company goes away. I need to know if that company is in any way necessary for me to use the device.
I'd love to take a week or two and see if I can't set up some kind of experiment to see what all I can run without using like the legitimate API. And
here's what you do.
Do it on a private land that's not connected to the internet too, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you want to please Noah, go to a place that has no internet and set and unbox all of the stuff and then set it up and make it all work. And if it all works there and I don't have to have it connected to the internet.
I guess I've never done the packet level thing. But for the Hughes lights, so I guess everybody knows this, but just in case you're just watching, you don't know this, we have some Hughes lights in the studio that we try to match the color of the lights in front of me to the background behind me, so that way there's... Anyways, I have never, ever once activated these things, created a Hughes account, connected them to any service. I have...
that's not entirely true because you installed your app off the internet.
That is the only thing I've done. But once I installed the app, it did a LAN discovery over Wi-Fi. I never paired it to an account. And the downside of that is I have no control over these lights when I'm not in the studio. So that's the downside to it. But
here's my question too. And this actually came up in the chat room. We just had this discussion. My first question is, do you really need control of your lights when you're not at a place? Really, the only
maybe just to turn them off.
Exactly. But you can do that with occupancy sensors. So in my house, if there's a room that goes more than 10 minutes without any occupancy, if there's occupancy sensors in every room, if any room goes more than 10 minutes, it kills the lights in that room. So I never have to worry about the lights being left on, and it happens to turn them on too when you walk in. But I never have to worry about wanting to turn the lights off. Right. And the only time I want to adjust and say, well, I want this light a little lower, a little up or whatever, is if I'm actually in the house. And in fact, the only thing that I remotely access my house is my door system. And that's because if I've got heating and air guy coming over, I don't actually have to be there. I can watch him on the cameras so I can see everything he's doing, and I can control what parts of the house he gets into. And so I can let him in, and he can go downstairs and go into our furnace room, work on the furnace, and I don't even have to be there for that. Past that, I don't really need connection. If I really needed to, I could always VPN in and then reset that VLAN and get to it.
I'm with you. I have had situations where, for instance, when I had the Smart Things hub at the Mycroft office, and a couple times the power went out, and it notified me that like it can't get to the hub, and like this is both bad and good. It's bad in that of course Samsung has this information, all the information that's getting from that hub, but at the same time, like it was really good because I was like, crap, the power's out. Like I need to, or the internet's out. Like I need to figure out what's going on over there.
And I'm not opposed to having notifications of that kind of stuff. I just want to control them. So for example, in my house, I don't really care if the power goes out. That doesn't matter. What I do care about is if my rack downstairs loses power, but my UPS is set up to give me a notification anytime it loses AC power down there. So I can accomplish the same things. I just don't have to send a hope and a prayer to the Internet of Things gods that Samsung is only using that for my benefit and not using it to, for
and
their
it's
benefit.
It's not, but what Chris was talking about last week is really on point. And that's that 99% of people who have dreamed of having this type of ability to, control their house with their voice or with, some kind of really cool dashboard or tablet that hangs on their wall. They don't have the ability to set that up themselves. And it's been cost prohibitive to have someone else set that up for you. I mean, it's been around forever. And you see these stories of really rich guys with like their really cool home automation setup. But now it's to the point where my dad, upon seeing my Hue lights, was like, I'm going to get those and set those up. And he's done within 15 minutes. And
it's interesting, Ryan, because that's so perfectly underscores sort of a typical dichotomy we find ourselves in the open source community. Is there is the easy button. Like for me right now, it's like Plex could be the easy button, but setting up a super crazy great Kodi system with a NAS backend and an MB backend that manages all of that, that's way cooler for me, but it's not something an average person wants. Whereas Plex actually is managing to break into the average home person theater with clients for the PlayStation and whatnot. Internet of Things is a lot of things. When it comes to, computers, phones, and Internet of Things, there's this category where it's very valid for some people to just want the really easy version, and there's the category of people that want the really geeky thing. And so, Ryan, I'm kind of curious. We've talked about Hue's lights predominantly. Are there other Internet of Things type toys and devices and tools that you've used in your home that you actually find to be valuable, maybe even more than a toy?
So I really, really, really like the lighting. I mean, that's that's where I've spent the most time, because what happened was for instance, when I go to sleep at night, I'm laying in bed and I'm reading, and then I'm like, I just want my lights to be off, but I don't want to get up and turn them off. Like, this is such a simple thing. So I just tap on my phone, turn off lights, they're off, and then I go to sleep. The other stuff that I've played with were the switches, which you talked about getting. Yeah. The switches allowed me to control multiple different lights at the same time, which is kind of neat. So you hit this one, and it was in a really big building, and it turns off like half of the lights here, but they're not on the same power, so that wouldn't normally typically be possible. And then there are different sensors, that have existed, but now they're using these same protocols. So there's motion sensors, there's water sensors, there's
occupancy sensors. And
occupancy
the
sensors.
The sensors aspect is extremely interesting, because I've seen examples of a setup where I arrive at the Jupiter Broadcasting Studio, it recognizes that it's me at the door, and then a series of events internally are triggered. Temperature, lighting, all these things. They seem like a bunch of first world concerns at first, and like, oh, well, these are just silly things that when you have extra money, you're just going to blow your money on. But it turns out, at least this is my opinion, at the end of the day, we are just we are just hairless monkeys, and when you can modify the lighting a little bit, and when you can automatically take care of things for you that normally take even just a teeny tiny bit of brain space, it's actually kind of nice. Not only does the lighting help with mood and help with family dynamic, and it can actually make the night better for an entire family. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but it actually, the hues lights and setting colors and setting the mood and tone, it's made a huge difference in some of the examples I've heard. My partner Hadia uses it in her acupuncture clinic to adjust the lighting in the back where people are resting getting acupuncture. She uses the Hughes spotlights, the big ones, and manages that from her phone to set it with and match the music and all of that. She's using it in a clinical setting in a way that's very clever, because it sets a certain kind of mood and it sets a certain kind of tone, which hopefully for her later translates to more business. And so you can use it in sort of ways that are just nice at that base monkey level. Oh, the lighting in here is very nice, and like silly things too, like when the sun starts to set, the Hughes lights can automatically adjust their color temperature to sort of represent that. So you sort of get a warmer, darker lighting in your house as the sun goes down, and those things can help you transition into having a better night's sleep. So there's a lot of things here to mess with. It's not just a stupid way to waste your money, and it's not all just toys either. And that's why devices out there to help you manage all of this are going to be super, super important. So we've had a lot of things we've covered. Do you want to give any additional resources and ideas for folks, Ryan? Oh, hold on, I don't hear you yet. Pop that button for me. There you go.
I would just point people at, a bunch of different resources like OpenHab, like Home Assistant. One use case that my wife and I have is we have a scene that's set up in the Smart Things Hub where, when we're getting ready to smoke hookah at the end of the, sometimes like it turns down the lights in those rooms to a bunch of different colors that look cool together, and it puts on, and you can have like an if this then that thing where it turns on like a certain type of music on Pandora on the TV on the Chromecast, and like all of that comes together to create a really cool scene. And so I think that we're just at the beginning of people using this to do some really, really complex stuff, normal people doing this to do some really, really complex stuff. And so I would just tell people to check out, like, Home Assistant is a great one. And you have that in the show notes, and I'm sure you'll link it. But it's open source, and so not only can you get in there, and if you are a developer, work with some of the APIs, work with some of add some more, plugins so that you can control more,
even more things. Which it already has a ton, really, Ryan. It has a ton.
Yeah. And but everybody benefits from that. And like, if you look, there's some interesting tie-ins that could happen there. Like if you have some event on your calendar, it changes the stuff, and things like that would be really, really cool. And honestly, we come back to the same thing every time, Chris. You and I want to have the Star Trek experience everywhere.
Computer T hot.
Yeah. And so I would love to see that be an open source one, and I'm happy. I'm just happy that we don't have 20 different proprietary communication standards for these things. Like I understand Noah's problem with it all, but that I'm happy that there is a possibility that we can actually have some openness and some interoperability.
And Linux users aren't left out either, which is rare and nice. We'll see where it goes. What were you going to... Noah, you had a closing thought there?
My closing thought is just this, is that I like the concept of a Star Trek experience, but, a couple things. One is oftentimes these things that sound really cool end up being a really bad science project. And I probably got a little hurt early on because I was one of the early adopters playing with X10 back in the 90s. And if you ever did that, like the first condo that my wife and I lived in, and I tried to automate it with X10, and it was a disaster. Like, she'd go into the bathroom and she'd push the button, but because of the way the RF protocol thing was supposed to go back to the hub and then send the command up to the light switch that was supposed to actually turn the light on, it would miss it sometimes, but it was like, it wasn't even consistent. It was like 1 out of every 50 times. And so then she just couldn't turn the light on in the bathroom, and then I got yelled at, and I had a really rough start to automation. And so I am I am really into to long history with a good track record, professional level stuff, not so much the entry level stuff. And then the second thing is I get the appeal for I say one thing and then all of this stuff happens, but if we're not controlling how that stuff happens, if we're not paying attention to how that stuff happens, I think you very quickly slip into being a slave to your technology rather than owning it. And I have a fundamental. You're never going to sell me on that, no matter how cool it is.
All right, the lines have been drawn, and I have to give you a nod out of standing. You have been literally messing with this for, like you said, since the 90s. However, I will say this. Here's where I feel like it's a little different and has me excited. So first of all, if you get kind of bored with computing, if you feel like there's not a lot of interesting things happen, tablets, phones, blah, it's boring, right? Internet of Things is new. It's dynamic. There is new things happening here. I hate that term. I hate blogging a term. What are all the terms we hate? Cloud. I hate cloud. I hate all these terms, you guys. But if you put these crappy terms aside and you look at it, there's actually some interesting things happening here. And here's the best part.
What about derp learning?
Derp learning's a big one. That's a big one that I don't like the name of, except for Anyways, there's something really exciting though at the core of all of this. It takes advantage of one of open source core strengths, and that is to adapt, to expand, and assimilate like the Borg. And that's why, even though there's so many different standards, some of them are not open, but they all can be brought together under the hood, under the umbrella of open source projects like OpenHab, which promotes itself as easily running on a Raspberry Pi, which if you think about it, that's the perfect type of centralized router. We've already mentioned it before, Home Assistant, home-assistant.io. These are open source projects that bring all these different crazy things together under one hood, under your control, and there's some actual fun things you can get your hands into, start building things and connecting hardware and software and managing it with Linux and open source. That, at the end of the day, seems like a plus for me because it could equal, eventually, more Linux users, and you all know we're all about that. And that is Linux Action Show's first of what I'm sure will be many debates about these Internet of Things devices. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But before we get out of here, we're going to thank System76 and read some emails. Yeah, it's System76. They sponsor this show now for quite a while. Long before Ryan was a twinkle in our eye, System76 was creating machines born to run Linux. Go over there and grab a machine, a desktop, a laptop, and did you know? Also servers too. System76.com, powerful computers to help you do more. And guess what? Built for Linux. You don't want to have to worry about it. System76. There's a machine here in the studio. I don't want to have to worry about it. Guess what? It's a Bonobo. This Bonobo has been my go-to champ now for I don't know how many years, and that's the machine I'm talking to Noah on right now. A Bonobo from System76, desktops, laptops, built right here in the US of A. And you heard us mention it earlier. Oh, man. That new Oryx Pro, it makes me want to reach out to a reseller I happen to know of System76 that accepts Bitcoin and buy myself one. System76.com has got Oryx Pros now with the GTX 10 cards. Oh my God. And I guess starting with it, and I'm not like Mr. Graphics here. You'd have to ask the beard. But I guess starting with the GTX 10 series, there's not like mobile series cards anymore. Did you know this? It's like
no, I didn't.
It's the card because they've gotten the power consumption down on the 10 series that it's the desktop and the laptop cards are more equivalent than they have ever been. You'd have to ask the beard for more information. He knows more. But as somebody who's just recently got into a game that takes all of the graphics performance that I have, and I also happen to have a workflow that is extremely GPU intensive, Oryx Pros, oh my God, with the GTX 10 series graphics card, yes please. Plus you can put like 1,000 drives in that. That might be an exaggeration, but it's close to it in that laptop. System76.com. Thanks to them for supporting the show, but really, thanks to them for just making kick-ass systems and being part of the community. It's pretty cool to have a laptop and desktop and server maker as a sponsor of the show that makes Linux computers. This show's 10 years old, and that concept, if you would have told me 10 years ago, blows my frickin' mind. System76.com. Go check them out. Okay, so actually, this is a legitimately not necessarily at all planned, other than Noah thought to throw it in the feedback. And and it is kind of perfect for what we just talked about. This is a blog post, the Cisco blogs, and it's about Andrew's experience on listening to Jupiter Broadcasting shows and picking up a desktop. And if you're curious to hear what it's like for somebody to jump into Linux and do all of the above, and do it with a System 76 machine, this is great. I'll tell you, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It went so well, he became a patron for the network.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's a good sign. But you can read the entire post. We'll have it linked in the show notes. It's nice to see that from time to time. So
I was worried as I was going through. I was like, "How's it going to end? How is it going to end?"
I was too.
I knew that all along. I knew that all along.
No, I actually didn't. Because sometimes those blog posts come up and they're like, "Man, this XYZ didn't work for me. I don't know why those crazy guys at the Linux Action Show ever recommended this. I'm out." And I always feel bad because it's like, well, that's a really unique. No, this guy.
Not only is it a unique experience, I personally, what I found is a lot of times they haven't taken it past, I ran into a problem. Nobody ever said that there's going to be a problem-free experience. It's just that your problems will be handled if you run into a problem. So, and most people don't take it that far.
I liked it. It was a good post. We don't have to read the whole thing. We'll let it. It's one of those. It's like it's roundup style. You can go read it on your own afterwards. So Nathan writes into the show to VPN or not to VPN. I've been in this position myself recently, and I've talked about it on Linux Unplugged. Hi, Chris and the team. Huge fan of the shows for maybe 4 years now. That's cool. But my question is, and will shed some light on the discovery of a viewer you have. He says, my first child is almost here, and I want to make sure my family's life is safe and secure going forward. I have been there. Before I set up a VPN server with a Raspberry Pi, likely, could I clear the air, please? Number 1, using a NAS at home for photos and files. I log into other devices using their MyCloud website plus via Android Qfile app, and it connects with SSL enabled. So setting up a VPN isn't actually needed because he does have SSL. But OpenVPN does look straightforward. It would allow him to connect to his other services behind his network, and for privacy and security, it might be a nice plus. But he's not sure if it's necessarily needed. A VPN's only really useful when I have things like open Wi-Fi or I'm out and about and I'm maybe visiting other countries. But for keeping things anonymous, for things like torrents, those can be achieved using Tor. So again, do I really want a VPN? He also says he could have a handful of scripts to make things easier for his life, but he wants to know if we could shed some light on his overall problem. He's strapped for time, he only has a limited amount left before the baby's here, and would like to know the best way to keep his home networking private. What do you think, Noah?
I am more and more a big solution or a big proponent of simple solutions. So, for example, like, and this is kind of cheating, but the Microtech routers that we put in, it's literally you check a box for OpenVPN, install the OpenVPN client on your desktop, and now you have a VPN established. Then you can tweak a lot of stuff in there, but just getting it set up, that's a really easy way to just kind of get everything kind of laid, and then you can go in and start tweaking different problems as they come up or as you decide to change things.
I think I would pass this on to Nathan. I wouldn't confuse VPN with protecting what you do online. It's more about, think of it as like tunneling to a spot on the internet and popping up there, which can be useful and can sort of hide where you're coming from. Say, you know, you're, as an example, if you were a U.S. intelligence agency and you wanted to hack the DNC and release all of their emails to WikiLeaks, you would probably VPN to Russia first and then connect to the DNC server and do the hack. So it would make it look like you came from Russia. It doesn't necessarily mean you are in Russia. So there is some value to that, but it's not keeping everything you do online a secret. So don't confuse the two things. Also, it might be worth looking into plugins like HTTPS Anywhere and services like OpenDNS, which can protect your network from malware, porn, etc.
Yeah, and the other thing is I'm a huge proponent of privateinternetaccess.com. I've been a member there for years.
What's that?
It's like
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I can't believe it. So privateinternetaccess.com, you don't sign up with your name, you don't put your email, none of that stuff. They give you a unique ID number and a password. You pay them, and then you can log in, and they keep no records. And it has come up in court a couple of times where they have sued Private Internet Access and said, we demand the records for who was connected this time. And they said, listen, we'd love to give them to you, and you're welcome to come search your system. We just don't keep logs.
So
really
there's actually some paper trail where they've done some litigation, and they said we can't provide it. That's the real peace of mind. Yeah,
exactly. And so, and I've been a member there for years. And so, anytime I'm doing anything, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be illegal or wrong or immoral or any of that stuff. Yeah. Just sometimes you just don't want the headache of having certain things tracked to you. So it's just an icon up in my in Ubuntu, and I click on my VPN, and a little padlock shows up. And now I can browse through them.
At the risk of spoiling a couple of episodes of Linux Unplugged, which I would actually recommend you go back and listen to because I covered this a lot, my ISP, about 3 hops up from me, is doing an inline proxy. It's breaking SSL connections, it's breaking HTTP connections, and it's proxying everything I do. And it's not only is that a massive privacy violation, but it turns out these sons of bitches don't know how to design a network, and so it's also extremely slow because so many other people on the network are hitting the same proxy server, and they can literally introduce almost 1,000 milliseconds of extra latency.
Wow.
Yeah, it's literally noticeable, and it drives me crazy. And using a VPN bypasses it completely because I go through the VPN. All of my traffic's tunneled through that. I never hit their proxy. And going through the VPN actually makes individual page loading faster. Right there, full stop, all I need. And so and it sounds like Private Internet Access is a badass one that has a legal record of defending their users' privacy.
The other thing they have too is they have different outlets that you can connect to. So for example, for you, if you want to browse, you're doing daily browsing stuff, you connect to San Francisco, but you want to do something that is maybe a little shady, you can go outside the country even.
So I don't have the same legal background, but I got a ton of recommendations for people I really respect in our community for AirVPN. I've talked about this in Linux Unplugged. Same thing. They let you pick your outlet. They have a really good system to see which servers are busy, how many users are connected. They make it crazy easy to download and just configure a network manager to automatically connect to the VPN for you. So just like you connect to Wi-Fi, you connect to this VPN, and it's nice because they just generate the scripts for you using their website, and you download it, and then you point network manager at it. So airvpn.org is my VPN service provider, and it sounds like privateinternetaccess.org is Noah's.
Yep.
A couple of good ones.
Used them for a while.
Well, there you go. So if you have a VPN service provider you love, leave a comment at linuxactionshow.reddit.com or on YouTube where you watch this potentially. Also, open source projects, news, anything you think we should spotlight, or your feedback, also welcome at linuxactionshow.reddit.com. Don't forget the show is live on Sundays over at jblive.tv. Get it converted to your local time zone at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Send us your emails at jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact. And last but not least, do not forget about the brand new show, User Air, premiered on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network last week, so you can get in at the ground level. Episode 2 is going to be recorded after this show and will probably come out Wednesday morning, assuming all of that new fancy technology we're relying on actually works. We'll see. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next week. So here's the thing, WW, is if WW says that instead of talking about the Linus hit pieces, we should just not cover them. I think that's sort of like saying if I just put my head in the sand, then it's not a problem. It's like they're still going to get attention regardless if we cover them or not. That's the first thing. And second of all, I think it's important for the show to take a position that we're not taking this Linus shit standing down anymore. These people are creating a narrative that is bogus, and they're trying to push out one of the greatest contributors to open source of our time. That's the show's take. Oh yeah, Ryan, Noah had a question for you.
What instrument do you play, Ryan?
Every instrument. I have 2 guitars back here. I have an electric guitar there. I have a cajon in my closet. I have a violin in my closet. I have a ukulele in my closet. I have this banjo that I made right here.
I'm not quite that diverse. I can bounce around from drums, guitar, and piano, keyboard, whatever. And I've got a collection of little instruments. I don't suppose you happen to play saxophone.
I do play saxophone.
Could you teach me how to play the soprano saxophone? I have a soprano saxophone. I just don't know how to play it. Well, I can kind of like bang out some notes, but I'd like to learn how to play it better.
I play the alto sax, but I don't know if there's a considerable
mostly what I need help with embouchure. I can figure out the key, like the keying, but like it's like proper breath control and embouchure. Like the problem is every other instrument I've ever played except for the flute is I play with my hands, right? My drum kit I play with the hands, and keyboard I was playing piano since I was 3 years old, play that with my hands. And so like when I tried to go into like woodwinds, it just like it screws me up, and I'm like I can't. My mind just isn't set up, and counting with your feet and stuff like it's just weird.
Yeah, I started out. I don't know what instrument I started out. I probably started out on saxophone, and then I joined a band and kind of when you're playing music all the time with your buddies, you just start to pick up a little bit of everything.
That's exactly what happened. So I was doing. Back in college. I was playing my wife's church on Sundays. I rehearsed for her church on Tuesdays. I rehearsed for my church on Thursdays. I was doing youth group on Wednesdays. I was doing Campus Crusade for Christ on Fridays. So like probably 5 or 6 out of a 7-day week, I was out somewhere either playing or practicing. And what ended up happening is like you get together, and a lot of the guys were rotating from one group to the other as well. So then somebody wouldn't show up, and they'd be like, "Oh, we need somebody to fill in on acoustic guitar," and I'm like, "I'll learn. Show me." And you pick up a couple chords, and it's like, wow, it's pretty easy to go from that to electric guitar. Well, it's pretty easy to go from that to bass, and so then you just kind of work your way around.
Yeah, that's where it started for me too. Somebody didn't show up for the youth group band one time, and they're like, "Ryan, you can sing. Why don't you come sing?" And then that escalated like you talked about.
I don't sing. Like if I sing, like people like they start like evacuating the building. They think sirens are going up. Dude, you know what the worst thing ever is, and I kind of wonder if you're not dealing with this a little bit.
What is it?
Do you have anything that?
Let's see. Oh, I gotta show my pants. No, Jeez, I'm getting inflexible. Oh my God, I'm sitting down too much. What were you gonna say?
Do you find that like everything gets hosed when you move? Like I can't sign into any of my banking stuff half the time because I put in my address and they're like, "This is not the address that we had on file."
God!
Even though I updated all that crap,
that is a year-long process for me.
Did you live anywhere else in the last 2 years? And I'm like, yes. Then they're like, and then I enter all that information. Then they go, "We're gonna have a representative contact."
Yeah.
I'm like, then why did I enter all that?
So
stuff?
first of all, I'm homeless. I'm not allowed to live from an RV, so I have to pretend like I live at the studio in order to get any of this shit taken care of. And let me tell you how many times I've had to tell some of these. It's a major problem, though. It's a major problem. And on top of that, I'll tell you what. I don't want any of this stuff. I don't want to I don't want to have to deal with. I don't want mail. I don't want mail.
Yeah, dude. You know what I'm looking for? Here, $1 million idea coming to you live from the Linux Action Show right now. Right there. I'm serious. I've been looking all over for a service like this, and I have a feeling it exists because somebody has to. The entire world of 4.3 billion people can't be this dumb that nobody has thought of this.
It's more than 4.3 billion.
Whatever. There has to be a service where I can list a mailing address as my mailing address, and then just open all my mail. Put it on a scanner, scan it, email that shit.
Those do exist because I've seen full-timers talking about it before.
Because I need that.
But I can't find it. I can't find it.
Well, I can't either. And the other thing is you have to find a way that when you get a card, like a package, like if I get an ATM card, you have to overnight that crap to me. And I don't care if it costs me $20 every time that happens because I rarely get anything in the mail that I care about.
Yeah.